Hey, what's going on, everyone? This is Mitch. Good Tuesday evening to you all. Hope you guys had an awesome day. Hope you all are having an awesome week so far, and hope you all had a great and very Merry Christmas. If you're just tuning in, haven't watched a video since Christmas, hope you all had a very good Christmas. And, we're getting a little bit closer to the new year, and we got some active weather coming up. It's going to be different in terms of active weather compared to the active weather we just saw over the last several days through the holidays. This is going to be the chance for some flooding, some severe weather, and then, of course, some areas could see some winter weather, but it's going to be a totally different air mass as we're approaching the new year and just after. We're going to talk about how long it's going to last. We're going to talk about the chances of severe weather, especially in watching a system just after New Year's. We're going to talk about the potential of how much rain people can get, and it's just going to feel like a different world, especially in the eastern U.S., and the southeast, and even the central U.S. So we're going to break it all down, get as detailed as we can. Of course, a lot of people are already eyeing past this big warm-up and looking at when is it going to shift back to chances for more winter weather. I do think there will be a shift, but I think we have to wait until about the second week of January. So this is going to make a lot of warm weather fans happy, and it's not going to make winter weather fans happy at all. But even for you warm weather fans, this is going to come at a price, and we're going to talk about that in this video. If you folks have not subscribed, certainly consider doing that. Like the video if you like it. Hit me up on Twitter. Great way to follow along. And if you ever consider joining my channel, I got 2021 great members who have joined my channel, and they support me each and every month, and I really appreciate you folks. And I appreciate everybody who makes up the family of this channel and supports me by watching my videos daily and sometimes twice a day. It really means the world. And more importantly of all, if you guys got anything that I can pray about or pray over, please put those in the comments. As always, it gives me an opportunity to pray over them, and it gives others an opportunity to do so too. And we can all look out for one another and glorify God doing it through prayer. Let's get rolling. 6 to 10 day temperature outlook, January 2nd through the 6th. But I can tell you, we're already going to start to feel this warm up before then. This was issued today. Just know that if you're in the eastern U.S., it is going to be above average temperature-wise. We can look at these darker red colors all day, but it's going to be above average. The chances are 80 to 90% in this area right here in the Ohio Valley, but everybody's going to see it. But one thing you'll notice in this pattern that really is eye-catching to me is it's not your typical troughing in the west and ridging in the east. Of course, we are going to have both of that, but you got around near normal to maybe slightly below average temperature-wise out here, but nothing substantial. You don't really have a true positive PNA, which is or a true negative PNA. Negative PNA meaning you have troughing in the west. You're just going to have a lot of impulses of energy that's going to keep you all around average to maybe slightly below average temperature-wise. Along with this, you have precipitation outlook. This is the 6 to 10 day outlook on precipitation. Moisture, this could be snow for you, this could be rain, but I can tell you for the entire eastern U.S. and most of the central U.S., this is going to be rain. And almost the entire lower 48 at minimum has near normal chances of precipitation occurring. So it's going to be very rainy. Some areas maybe a little snowy, but this is probably going to be for higher elevation-driven locations, that's for sure. The 8 to 14 day outlook, same kind of deal. Not much changes from this. This takes us through the 10th of January. We're knocking out 1/3 of January, unfortunately, in my case, because you guys know I like my snow and my winter weather, especially in winter. We're going to potentially waste about 1/3 of January on above average temperatures. So you're going to get a lot of snow melt up here in the Northeast. Now, that doesn't mean you're going to have 60 to 70 degree temperatures in the Great Lakes region. That's not what that means. Now, you're going to see that in the South. But it does mean that you're going to have above average temperatures in these areas. We'll talk about how much above average here in a second. But the 8 to 10 day precipitation outlook for the same day range is the 4th through the 10th. From the Climate Prediction Center, still above average precipitation predicted for most of the same areas. So we could just continue the same pattern, I think, for the next 2 weeks, honestly, guys. And really what's driving this is as we start out tomorrow morning, we knock out the rest of that Arctic air. It says by that little clipper that swung through yesterday, delivered some snow for the Mid-South, and even some sleet in my neck of the woods. I actually saw about 7 or 8 sleet pellets. I saw that on the way to work this morning. It was I guess it was neat, but nothing too crazy to get excited about or anything. But if you notice a pretty sustained ridge builds in the central and eastern U.S., you see these reds and oranges right here, that is ridging. Just think of that as pretty much above average temperatures. And the blue, that is troughing, or a cold front, or a low pressure, cutoff low, upper level low, whatever it may be. Just think of the blue as pretty much active weather, just disturbances in this case. So we keep moving here in time, getting into the 29th, and you notice we just have these little pieces of energy that keeps flying down into the western U.S. And we have just consistent troughing. I know when you see these blues, you think below average temperatures. In this case, it's just low pressures, pieces of energy. The Pacific jet out here, which we'll show here in a second, is very active. We just have impulses after impulses that are flying through. In fact, we've had some pretty crazy weather in the Pacific Northwest today. It looked like a little mini hurricane was coming into the Oregon coastline a little earlier, but it was like a mid-latitude cyclone, not literally a tropical system, but it looked like one on radar, pretty wild. And then as we're getting into the morning of January 1st, we watch this trough digging into the western U.S., and we got to watch this one because this digs and has that look to it and might try to become negatively tilted. A little impulse, a little shortwave trough, a little surface low probably flies off the base of this trough, and this is when it can yank in a lot of low-level moisture. But I can tell you, going through the entire duration of this run, we're getting 6 to 10 days out. January 6th, we're still dealing with a lot of ridging, probably average to above average temperatures in the central and eastern U.S., but eventually, as we get into around the 8th, the 9th to 10th time frame. Now, this is very, very far out. We might eventually get a pattern flip. And the 10th to 11th time frame is when a lot of people think that we'll start to flip the pattern. But that is a very unreliable time frame. And the pattern doesn't look great by any means. So we got to see what happens here. We got to see. La Niñas are known for what we call front-loaded winters, meaning all the winter weather and cold weather happens in the front of winter. Now, it seems like as of late in the eastern U.S., we haven't had much of a February. It seems like February is like the new March, and March is the new February. But we'll see what happens. That's talking too far in advance. But we look at the latest GFS, and we just watch how this unfolds. And this is just one operational run of the GFS. We start to get into late this week, ending the last week of the year. Here comes our first system. This could bring a little bit of strong to severe storms along the Gulf Coast. We'll have to watch this, but as of now, the Storm Prediction Center doesn't have any kind of highlighted areas. But we'll watch. But this is kind of the first system we deal with. As we get into the afternoon of the 30th, this flies through, delivers some rain right for the morning of our New Year's Eve. For the southeast, even rain up into the Ohio Valley. This is not snow. All the cold air gets locked up in Canada into the northern plains, and even into the northern plains, the cold air isn't substantial. This continues, and this is really going to dampen probably all the New Year's Eve festivities across the eastern U.S. It really is. We'll look at the Euro, and it looks even more rainy. This moves through, and then we watch this kind of trough, this upper trough or mid-level trough that begins to dig and we don't really know the evolution of this trough that digs into the western U.S., but we do know that along this trough, probably some kind of shortwave low pressure, some kind of surface low pops off the Rockies, and then this could bring maybe a substantial winter storm. And no, we're talking kind of far out still. We're talking all the way to the January 1st, 2nd time frame. And we're getting pretty close to that time frame, but that's still kind of the medium range, medium to long range. And this shows a pretty substantial winter storm for Wyoming, areas of the Dakotas, maybe Nebraska, but we don't know the evolution of this. But of course, on the warm side, this yanks up a pretty broad, moist or warm sector into this area. So of course you're going to have the kinematics, and we're going to have to see how north the thermodynamics rise, but we're going to have a pretty large yank of moist air that gets yanked into these Gulf states, into the deep south, Mississippi, Louisiana, maybe Arkansas, but we do not know the severity level of this. But I would not be surprised if the Storm Prediction Center, and we'll talk about that here in a second, issues a slight risk past day 4 for this. But this has severe weather written all over it to me. And then this moves through. We'll have to see how it evolves further downstream. But we get pretty far out. But there's a chance we could have a lot of rain with this. And then a low pressure pops off at around day 9 or 8. And we have a shot of some marginal cold air. We have to watch the northeast for maybe a winter weather event. The Euro kind of has this too. And speaking of the Euro, we kind of look at the Euro too here. And really, New Year's Eve looks damp, guys. And, we're getting into the 30th. we're getting into the 31st and, waking up the morning of New Year's Eve, and a lot of rain across the deep south, mid-south, Ohio Valley. We're getting into the night of New Year's Eve leading up to New Year's, and low pressure flying right over the Ohio Valley, which screams a cutter, which means it cuts across areas of the eastern U.S. instead of riding off the eastern U.S., which would bring more cold air. Then potentially we would have winter weather, but in this case, it's just going to be a lot of rain for New Year's Eve. It's going to be a really soggy New Year's Eve, I'm telling you, for most of the eastern U.S. It's going to dampen any kind of festivities you have going on for sure. And this continues, becomes maybe a winter storm for areas of southeast Canada. And then after this storm, all eyes shift to this system out west. And as it does, I can tell you the European has the low pressure a little bit further south, which means it brings more winter weather a little bit further south, and that means it would probably push the ingredients for severe weather more confined to areas of the south. The GFS has this low pressure much further north, which means it would pull more areas of these southern states into the region of severe weather. So, there's already disagreement, which we expect from the European and the GFS at this range. But we have to watch for severe weather, maybe a substantial winter weather event for areas of the Midwest and northern plains for sure as it moves across. And then after that, we watch this system behind it, and it could potentially bring some winter weather. But this is past day 7 and day 8. We don't know what the heck's going to happen at this range, right? So what I can tell you is the Pacific jet right here is very active. But watch what it does. It doesn't fly south. As we get into New Year's Eve into January 1st, it really just kind of dives down to the western U.S. and then cuts across the middle of the country. So this just pulls a lot of warm, moist air into the southeast and all the way up into the Ohio Valley, into areas of the eastern U.S., at least a few days into January. And then after we get past the 5th to 6th time frame, I think we start to get a better handle on what's going to happen as we get into the mid part of January. Are we going to waste most of the month? Or what's going to happen? If you remember last January, at this point last year, it was looking like we were just going to continue to be warm for a while. We were already starting to kind of eyeball kind of a pattern flip. But at the same time, we didn't get our first substantial winter weather event for areas of the south and southeast and the eastern U.S. Of course, we had one on January 3rd, but the big one that hit was on January 16th. So sometimes it just takes a while. And our classic winters in the eastern U.S., things don't really get going until about mid to late January. Of course, you can have some early January, even late December winter storms, even early December. But most of the time on your classic winters where you get hit hard, from what I've seen here locally in the Carolinas and the Southeast, you normally have a threat right around late January and then another threat somewhere in February. So we'll see how this unfolds. But that Pacific jet definitely favors low pressures digging into the western U.S. and then cutting across the country. Rainfall between now and the next 7 days. This is going to back up. This is going to pivot, west or east a little bit. But I can tell you, there's going to be a lot of rain across areas of the Mid-South and the southern U.S. And we don't know where the epicenter of the heaviest rain is going to be. But just expect a soggy eastern U.S. in general, from the Ohio Valley down to the Gulf Coast, maybe all the way down to the southeast. But then areas in the northeast, maybe not quite as much moisture. But this area right here of the country, Mississippi, Alabama, Arkansas, Louisiana, Tennessee, Kentucky, a lot of rain. Totally different than what you've seen, where you got a couple episodes of winter weather. It's going to be much different. Talking about that severe weather event. One thing, when you see these low pressures shooting across the middle of the country, what it does is it helps to yank that low-level moisture out the Gulf. So it's been extremely dry with the Arctic air mass, which brings dew points into like the single digits and below zero. It's going to be totally different now as we are getting all the way until tomorrow. You're going to notice the moist air starts to build into eastern Texas, Louisiana, and then as we're getting into Thursday morning, I mean, you have dew points all the way into the 60s into potentially into southern Arkansas, and then you just got a moisture in general building into the southeast. You're going to feel it, especially when you're bordering, especially for you folks bordering the Gulf Coast. You're going to feel the moisture, a little bit of humidity in the air as we're closing off the year 2022 for sure. And then we keep moving forward here, and then here comes our big system. The upper trough digs the mid to upper trough digs into the western U.S., and then it pulls a lot of moisture all the way up into Missouri. But look at these dew points into the 60s, even 70s, into Louisiana, 60s in Arkansas, eastern and southeastern Texas, dew points in the 60s and 70s. We have to see how this evolves. But anytime when you have this huge pool of moisture into the south like this, of course, you're going to have probably some kind of severe weather. And if you look at the Cape levels going into the system just after New Year's, and this is just looking at the European and the long range, the mixed layer Cape, it shows Cape levels reaching well above 1,000 to 1,500 joules per kilogram with a spike in that low level of moisture. So we got to watch this because this could unfold into a severe weather episode for sure. So it's nothing that we're confident on yet, but it's something that a confidence is growing that we're going to have some kind of system. Another way to look at it is the 500 millibar heightened winds here. This is basically how fast winds are moving in the upper levels of the atmosphere here. And here it is. Here's this mid to upper level trough that digs. You're going to have some kind of shortwave low pressure that probably pops off here right into here, this closed low, and this is going to try to become neutrally or maybe even negatively tilted. We don't want it to become negatively tilted. Let me slow down, because if it does, then the dynamics begin to max out. Winds become a huge issue, and severe weather becomes a huge issue. And even on the cold side of the storm, the winter weather becomes a big issue. So this is it right here. This is the big system we watch just after New Year's. It digs. We have to see how this trends. Hopefully, it doesn't end up being that big of a deal, but we need to watch and see how this trends for sure. But I can tell you the Storm Prediction Center, it doesn't really show anything. It says predictability too low through every single day, but I would not be surprised if for, let's say, let's make sure I get the days right, maybe for day 5 or 6 or 7, either one of those days, we get a 15% risk issued for sure. So we need to watch out for this. I'm telling you, we need to watch this system just after New Year's for sure. Temperatures compared to average, these whites that you see here, that's 15 to 20 degrees above average temperature-wise to what your temperatures are typically this time of the year. And this will continue. If you're confused at what date we are at, look up here. And getting into New Year's Eve, getting into New Year's, above average temperatures. These are anywhere from 5 to 15 to maybe as much as 20 degrees above average temperature-wise. So the pattern completely flips. We thaw out here. And, look at this as we're getting into the January 3rd time frame. This right here on the Ohio Valley, now this is about 6 to 7 days out. This is as much as 25 to 30 degrees above average in the Ohio Valley. This would tell me the Ohio Valley could sneak in some 70s. But if we keep this going, it moves into the northeast, and it just looks like we're just going to torch what we call it in the weather community through at least the first week of January. It's just going to be above average temperature-wise. And then we have to see as we get a little bit closer to kind of the second week of January how it looks. But I can tell you above average temperatures are going to dominate most of the country. And what this means with temperature-wise is moving forward here, look at temperatures as we're getting into January 1st. 50s climbing into the Ohio Valley, widespread 60s and 70s for our first day of New Year's, first day of the new year. Of course, it's still cold, right, where it's expected to be cold in the northern plains and the Rockies, but still, nothing substantially low compared to average, that's for sure. But you keep this going. January 2nd looks very warm in the south. January 3rd, very warm. And we have to just see if this, this cold air begins to knock down this almost spring-like pattern in January and see if it cools us back down. It looks like we begin to cool back down as we enter maybe the end of the first week of January. But details will begin to evolve on this. We don't know exactly what's going to happen, but what I can almost guarantee you is that we're going to warm up for most of the central and eastern U.S., and it's going to get wet and kind of damp. It's not going to be those warm, sunny days that you would expect with a warm day. It's going to be kind of just warm, soggy, maybe higher humidity compared to what we're used to for January standards. So It's definitely not going to be these warm, beautiful, spring-like, summer-like days that you might be thinking it might be. But that's all I got, guys. Thank y'all for tuning in. God bless all y'all, and I'll be with y'all in the morning.